All right, guys, this is going to be the fourth video for chapter 14. We're going to talk about multiple baseline designs. So this goes with the learning objectives 8 through 10, which wraps up the chapter, I think. Or no, well, I guess there's going to be one more learning objective in the last section. So there's, we're going to talk about the structure of multiple baseline designs, what in the world those are, how the results can demonstrate a cause and effect relationship. We're going to identify and describe component analysis designs. I can't talk today. And the circumstances where you would use that type of design. And then we're going to identify the strengths and weaknesses, of course, of multiple baseline designs and the circumstances when you should and should not use those designs. So the basic problem with the single case designs that we've talked about in the previous 3 videos is that reversal component, right? It's required in order to show replication, in order to demonstrate that cause and effect relationship. Goodness, I can't think of words today. But the that reversal component presents an ethical problem for one, because again, if the treatment is effective and then we're removing it, is that ethical? But also, the behavior must show that immediate change as soon as the treatment is initiated. And then when you reverse it, it has to go back to baseline, which may not happen if it is a more long-term treatment, either because it takes longer for the treatment to take effect or because the treatment has a more permanent effect and the behavior is not going to change when you do the reversal part. So in those kinds of situations, we have to have a different kind of design, right? And so that is where the multiple baseline design comes in. It eliminates the need for that return to baseline, for that reversal component, but still enables you to show a replication part that would help demonstrate a clear cause and effect relationship. So, what does this look like? You begin with 2 baseline phases. My goodness, my voice went away for a second. You begin with 2 simultaneous baseline phases. Either it's 2 different people beginning a baseline phase at the same time, 2 different participants, or it is 2 different behavior baseline phases or 2 different situational baseline phases. We'll talk about those 3 things in a second. But either way, 2 baseline phases, but they start at the same time. And then the treatment phase is initiated for one of those baselines, and the baseline observations continue for the other. And then a little bit after the fact, at a different time, the same treatment is then initiated for the second baseline. And so the treatment note has to be the same. And so let me show you a visual example of what in the world this looks like, because I know some of you, all those words mean nothing. So this is just a hypothetical data, general. This is figure 14.11 in your book. Just a general example of what this could look like. So you have along the x-axis at the bottom, you have days of observation. So first day, second day, third day. They don't have them numbered, but you get the idea. Each line is a day. Each data point is a day. And then the y-axis, the vertical axis there, is showing our 2 different baselines, behavior for participant 1 and behavior for participant 2. So we actually have 2 people that we're studying here. The baseline is, you see, we studied the baseline we did baseline observations for participant 1 for 5 days, and then initiated the treatment for the next however many days, and the participant 2 continued their baseline observations for 5 more days, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, 6 more days, I guess. Oh, no. I miscounted. 5 more days. So we did 10 days of baseline observations for participant 2, and then initiated the treatment phase. And you can see clearly here that the treatment obviously had an effect because it is an immediate and dramatic change for both participants when the treatment was initiated. And because they were initiated at different times, we can be confident that it wasn't some sort of outside influence, because the only thing that changed was the initiation of the treatment. They were done at completely different times. So that's why you start at the same time but initiate the treatment at different times. And that's that way of showing that replication component. So there's 3 different ways you can do this. I alluded to that a minute ago. The first is this multiple baseline across subjects. So that's the example of what we just saw in that graph. That was 2 different subjects, but they are separate participants, okay? Because some of you might be thinking, well, if we're doing 2 different participants, how is that a single case study? And we mentioned in the beginning when we first started talking about single case studies, some do use more than one participant, but it's still not a large group of participants. So we're only using 2 participants here. Some, we'll look at an example later where there were actually 3 participants. But you're still keeping it very small. But the key thing is not just keeping it small, but they're still separate participants. We're not treating them as a group of participants. We're still studying them each individually, separately, as a single case study. Both, it's just like you're doing, almost like you're doing 2 single case studies at the same time. So that is the across subjects. So, do I not have 14.2 on the slide? I don't have 14.2 on the slide. Okay, let me go on the book here. Oh, no, I went too far. Sorry. 14.2 is another example of the separate participants. So this was, there were athletes who were being absent from class, showing up late to class, not participating in class, and it was affecting their performance. And the coach was like, we got to do something about this. And so there's 2 different athletes here, 2 different students. The top one is one student, student A, you can see that, student A, and then the bottom is student B. And so you can see we started a baseline at the same time at the beginning of the semester, and then they measured how many minutes late they were for class, you see, and each data point corresponds to each week of class. This is simplified. Obviously, I think they did the daily, I think is what it said, but they simplified this down so that we could see the pattern. But so the baseline phase, you can see very clearly, they're very late many times, right? Both times they start at the beginning of the semester, but then 6 weeks into the semester, we initiated a treatment phase for student A. Student B didn't, you can see the dotted line there, the vertical dotted line. Student B did not receive the treatment until it looks like week 9 or 10. And so the treatment, in case you're wondering why it says texting, is that they were supposed to text the academic counselor once they got to class to let them know, hey, I made it to class. And that accountability, you can see, caused a dramatic reduction in the minutes late they were to class. It obviously made a huge difference. That looks like they were barely late at all ever after that point. So, but you can see that dramatic and immediate change in behavior. That's that clear pattern we want to see that shows a direct cause and effect relationship. And again, because it happened with both students at different times, we can conclude that there is a cause and effect relationship there because it is replicated. And so, can you get her some crayons, please? Not markers, baby. No, crayons. I'm sorry. My kids are home. Okay, so that is an example of multiple baseline across subjects or participants. Okay, the second way that you can do this is multiple baseline design across behaviors. And so instead of two different participants, we have two different behaviors. And so the initial baseline phase is for two separate behaviors instead of two separate participants. And it's for the same participant. And then we institute the treatment at different times again. So it's the same pattern. Let me go back to this. Ignore the labels and pretend that this participant 1 says behavior 1, and instead of participant 2, it says behavior 2. And so the top half would be the first behavior and the bottom half would be the second behavior. And the treatment is initiated at different times for each behavior. The key for this to work is that the behaviors have to be separate of each other. In other words, they don't influence each other. The two problematic behaviors or whatever it is that you're trying to address, they don't influence each other. The two examples your book gives would be interrupting, or I'm sorry, for a disruptive student, if they have two different disruptive behaviors you're trying to address, let's say, and they're separate, obviously separate behaviors. So one would be just, overall interrupting class, talking out when they're not called on, that kind of thing. And then the second behavior is actually picking on students. It's a more active, aggressive behavior. And so, I'm sorry, there was just a really loud noise outside. And so, those would be two separate behaviors. Another example, would be, the idea of two separate phobias. If you're in a clinical setting and a patient had two separate phobias, that you wanted to try to address with the same treatment, and see how that would affect it. And so for this visual example here, you could place them in a situation where they would normally be, their phobia would be active, in the first, the top, part here, and initiate the treatment for that. And then you would do the same for the second phobia, but you would do a longer observation baseline period before initiating the treatment. Okay, and then for the third example here, or the third kind of multiple baseline design here, would be across situations. And so this would be, instead of, we've looked at two different participants, we've looked at two different behaviors, and now we're talking about two different situations. And so it may be the same behavior is happening in two separate situations. So the example your book gives is, a student is disruptive at school, but is also disruptive at home. And so, you would, again, using this same visual, you would, let's say that the top part is behavior at home, and the top and the bottom is behavior at school. And so you would observe them at home for 5 days or 5 weeks or whatever, and then initiate the treatment at home and observe what happens. But at school, you would wait longer before initiating the treatment at school, to see how that influences their disruptive behavior. So now there is a variation of the multiple baseline or reversal design, where parts of the treatment itself are broken down into separate parts. So maybe you want to look at the components. That's where the component word comes in. Maybe you want to look at the different components of a treatment and see which parts of the treatment are most effective, or what parts are least effective, or what parts work better together, or whatever. In order to do that, you would add or subtract one component in each phase, so it becomes a lot more of a complex design, and that would help you determine how each component contributes to the overall effectiveness of the treatment. And so if you did component analysis with a reversal design, that would look like you could do the baseline phase, and then you would do the first component of the therapy or the treatment, the second component, the third component. Those are each new phases, right? And you're observing them through those phases. And then to show that replication, we would go back, that reversal, we would go back to the baseline, and then we would do it again. We would do component 1, and then component 2, and then component 3, to see if we have the same pattern results. For component analysis with a multiple baseline design, oh wait, hold on, let me back up. I forgot. There's another way you can do the reversal design. I almost forgot to say this part. So you could do like I said, baseline, first, second, third component, baseline, first, second, third component. You could do it like that. But you could also do return to baseline in between each component. So you could do baseline and then first component of the treatment, then back to baseline, and then second component of the treatment, and then back to baseline and third component of the treatment. And then you could repeat that if you wanted the duplication. You could go back to baseline and then component 1, back to baseline, component 2, back to baseline, component 3. Obviously, this is only for those short-term effects and in situations where it is ethical to do this kind of thing, because that's going to be going back to baseline a lot, right? And so again, with reversal design, it's only for those short-term situations, not where the treatment or the manipulation or whatever it is you're introducing is going to cause a long-term effect. If it's going to cause a long-term effect in behavior, then you have to do the multiple baseline design instead. An example of this, so for the multiple baseline design, they give you an example in your book about a toilet training study, which was, let me see where it is. Okay. They had 3 different components to toilet training treatment, toilet training, whatever you want to call it. And so there was wearing the cotton underwear. There was a dense sit schedule, you can see here. And then there was differential reinforcement, where they were given something, as a reward when they were dry at their check. And so those are the 3 components of the toilet training that they are trying to analyze. And so you can see in figure 14.13 here, there's 3 different, this is the example I was telling you about. There's 3 different children here that they looked at. I'm sorry, my voice keeps going. So you can see that for multiple baseline, for component analysis, this is what it looks like. We've got 3 different participants, and we've got 3, yes, okay, sorry, I was looking at something really quickly. And so we have the baseline for all of them. They have A, they're labeling it A. And then we've got the components. You see each child experience the components in a different order. So instead of being initiated at a different time, like those examples we looked at before, instead here we're looking at them in a different order. Again, this is to see which is most effective, and if there's a certain order that is more effective. And so from this, you can actually see that whenever underwear is introduced, there is a large increase in the success, right? In all three kids. So when they went from baseline to underwear, in the first child, child two went from the dense sit to the underwear, and the third child went from dense sit to underwear actually as well. And each time that there was underwear, that's the largest jump in success was when an underwear was introduced. So that was obviously the most effective part of the toilet training. But an interesting thing that the researchers also noticed was that differential reinforcement was also very effective, but only when it was after underwear. So in child one, you see underwear here in B, and then C was the differential reinforcement, and you see it jumped up. In child two, same thing. Underwear was the third phase, and the differential reinforcement was the fourth phase, and again, jump there. In the child three, though, they received the differential reinforcement first. So right after the baseline, they received the differential reinforcement, and you see that there wasn't a huge jump in the success there. It wasn't much more effective than the baseline. And so that gives you an example of the things that you can observe when you are putting the components in a different order. So hopefully that kind of helps you guys visually see that. So the rationale for multiple baseline designs, the criteria for successful experiment it's the same as what we talked about for the reversal AB design. I'm so sorry, guys. So there is we need that clear and immediate change in the pattern of behavior when we switch from baseline to treatment. And then we have to have at least 2 demonstrations of the behavior change when the treatment is introduced. So we have to have that replication to establish that cause and effect relationship, right? And so that's the same. It is the same all around. That's true for any of the single case designs. Just a second, guys. I apologize. So there are obviously strengths and weaknesses of multiple baseline design. The strengths include the fact that you don't have to return to the baseline, right? We said we don't have to do that withdrawal of the treatment that can violate the ethical situations. And it's also good for those long-lasting or permanent effect treatments. Again, because with the reversal design, you can't do that. So that's the good thing about multiple baseline design. The weaknesses is that it can be difficult to identify similar but independent behaviors. And some of you might have noticed that when we were talking about the multiple behavior example or cross behaviors, that was a little bit convoluted. It can be very difficult to do that effectively. And then also, results can be compromised by individual differences between participants or between behaviors. And an example of this that your book gives is hold on, I'm going to get there, 14.14. So this is an example of a study that was showing, hold on, let me refresh my memory because this isn't what I thought it was. Oh, the color highlighting with math. Yes, sorry. Um, so they use different color highlighters to help them learn these math concepts to see their performance and see how it was affected. And these are three different. Um, there are three different participants um, here, and um, you can see that for participant 1 and 2, there was a clear increase in performance when they went from baseline to using this highlighting technique. But participant 3, um, it is not as conclusive. um, it's almost the same. And now part of that is because their baseline is kind of all over the place. And remember, we talked about that before about how when there's not a clear, um, um, a constant level um, in the baseline, that you really need more observations. And so this is one of those examples where more observations in the baseline may have helped level that out. Um, but either way, even if it had leveled it out, you can see that the highlighting technique, once the treatment is initiated after session 5, um, the those dots aren't, yeah, it maybe leveled it out. The highlighting maybe helped level out their performance, but it didn't really improve their performance because those dots are really around the same as most of the dots in the baseline. And so um, the question is why? Why wasn't it a clear and defined increase in performance like it was with participant 1 and 2? And likely this has something to do with just the individual differences in the way that participant 3 learns. And so that can be problematic. That's one of the weaknesses of multiple baseline design, is because you're using multiple participants or multiple behaviors, and there's just differences that occur in that that may make it harder to see and conclude what treatment is the most effective. Let's do the learning check really quickly. Which of the following accurately describes 2 baseline phases in a multiple baseline design? Um, I didn't know if you all could see that. Actually, I might have had that too high. So there's the question. And then the answer, hopefully you guys know from what we just talked about that the answer is that they are started simultaneously but end at different times. So remember, the baseline starts, both baselines start at the same time, but the treatment is introduced at different times. So the baseline phase ends at different times. That's the key to making sure that you are showing a clear cause and effect relationship. Number 2 is, under what circumstances is a component analysis, good grief, design appropriate? And so remember that component analysis is looking at the components of a treatment. And so the answer here is when a treatment consists of several distinct elements that you want to study, that you want to look at. The top answer, when a treatment is expected to have a permanent or long-lasting effect, that is when you would want to use a multiple baseline design. And then when a treatment is expected to have a temporary effect, you would use the reversal design, just to make sure you guys understand what's going on there. And then number 3, which of the following is a strength of the multiple baseline design? And if we look through these answers, it can be used when a participant has more than one problem behavior. Well, that's true because we can do the across behaviors design. And then it can be used when a participant has a problem behavior that occurs in 2 different locations. Well, that's when we would use the across situation design. So that's true. And then the third one is it can be used when a treatment is expected to have a permanent or long-lasting effect. And again, that's the main purpose of using a multiple baseline design. And so the answer is all of the above. All three of those are um, strengths and scenarios when you would want to use a multiple baseline design. So hopefully that helps you guys understand that part of the chapter a little bit better. And we only have one video left before the end of chapter 14. So if you guys have any questions, let me know.